Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Commute Talk. I got some requests to talk about how I got to where I am with programming, I assume they meant. So, thought I would talk a little bit about that. So, I started programming when I was 3, I think. My father brought home a work laptop that he was assigned because he was a traveling inspector for the government, and he was inspecting scales and gasoline pumps, making sure that they were accurately calibrated and that store owners were not scamming people or gas stations were not scamming people. That was his job. And he was on the road all the time, and he was, I guess, taking notes in his laptop and using some software or whatever. I don't know why he had a laptop, but he did. And when he would come home, he would bring the laptop, and I would just grab it immediately and just sit down and try to figure it out. And it was a Toshiba T1200 running DOS 3.3, and it had GW Basic, which I got really into at an early age. I thought it was amazing. And yeah, that's where I got started. And since then, I was always programming. I went from GW Basic to Q Basic to Quick Basic to Visual Basic, and I think I stayed in Visual Basic until I was maybe 12 or 13, which is when I started getting interested in C++, and I tried learning that for a while, and I found it was like, I mean, obviously, like, it was not very user-friendly compared to Quick Basic or Visual Basic or whatever. And I couldn't get hold of any kind of Windows compiler, I remember. So all I had was, for a long time, I had like Borland, C++, like an early DOS version of that. So because we didn't have internet access, and like the only way I could get software was like from someone else on floppies, and I didn't know anyone else that was into programming. And well, anyways, eventually we got access to the internet. I think in '96 or something like that. My mom got internet access, and then I was able to buy a copy of Visual Studio, I guess, whichever one came out in '97. And then I could actually try to learn C++ programming on Windows, which I was very excited about for a long time. And it's funny, I remember that back in those times, like when we just got internet access, I was fascinated by the internet, and I thought that since I couldn't find anyone in my hometown or anyone in school or any friend who was into programming, maybe the internet could help me. And like, it's still there to this day is my posts to news groups, like asking if there are any kids who know programming. Even QBasic would be something, because I just wanted to find other kids to talk to, but no one responded to me. It was very sad. Anyway. So I got Visual C++ and Visual Studio off the internet, and actually I put out a piece of shareware when I was 12. It was a text editor that was like, I basically took the text editor example program that came with Visual Studio, and then I added all of this stupid functionality, like reverse the selection so the text is backwards, or like turn this into Pig Latin, or like count how many words in this text file, and I just added all these different features I could think of, and I bundled it together, and I called it the BrainPad. BrainPad was my program, and I was very proud of it, and I put it on the internet as shareware, and I think I was asking for like, I don't know, like $3 if you wanted to register it. And then some guy found it who worked at a magazine, and he put it on the like this was back when like you would buy a PC or computer magazine in the store, and it would come with a floppy disk. So some guy at a magazine like that found my brain pad, and he put it on the monthly floppy disk, and it went out to thousands of people in Sweden, and a bunch of them ended up buying the software from me. And I remember I was flabbergasted because, like, to me, shareware was like, it was this abstract thing where, like, you would have some program that would start up and it would have this nag screen, and then it would go away after a while, or like you would have to click, yeah, I know, I'll evaluate a little bit more. But being a kid and not having any money of my own, basically, or not much, I never really thought of this as like, oh, it wants my money. I just thought it wanted me to wait a bit and click on keep evaluating. But then, of course, and I mimicked this stuff in my program. So it had like a nag screen and like a little file about like how to register. But I was just imitating what I had seen in other shareware, because like back then shareware was really big, and all the stuff I had that wasn't pirated was shareware, and everyone loved shareware. Anyways, a bunch of people sent me money, and I had to figure out what to do with that. It's like, oh shit. So like, what should be in a registered copy of BrainPad? I don't fucking know. So I remember sitting there and like making these custom builds for everyone, and like editing the about box and like putting the person's name into a little label, like registered to so and so. And I sent out these floppy disks, and it was just a crazy time, but really fun. And I remember I put all the money I made from that shareware into a special wallet, but then I don't remember what happened to that wallet. But I don't know. It seemed like a fortune at the time, but in retrospect, I think maybe 10 or 12 people or something like that registered it. So it wasn't like a huge crowd or anything, but it was unbelievable to me as a 12-year-old kid, right? Anyways, so I had my early success there with BrainPad, but then I became a teenager, and something with hormones happened, and I thought that, you know what, this whole computer thing, maybe it's fun, but that's not very cool. And you know what is cool is playing in a band and drinking and partying and being a jackass. So I started focusing on that instead, and I ended up spending quite a few years only doing that and doing very little programming. So it wasn't until I was like 18, I think. So I went from like maybe 14 to 18, not really programming much, just a little bit, but not much. And it wasn't until at the age of 18 when I sort of came to my senses, and I had flunked out of one high school. Not flunked out, but like I had just abandoned one high school because I started going to high school for sound engineering, and I realized 2 years into it that this was just not for me. So I had like a moment of clarity there, and I switched over to another school where they were teaching programming at a high school level. It was like the focus of that high school. And then I clocked another 2 years there before I gave up on that too, because school is just not for me. But at that school, I was surrounded by all these other kids who were super into programming, and they were into Linux and networking and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, I came from 99% or 95% Windows and DOS stuff at that point, so it was super fascinating to meet all these people who were so into Linux and the BSDs and stuff, and they showed me how to use those things, and they taught me about networking and all kinds of stuff. And I remember for a while I was very much into I guess cracking is the is the preferred term. I don't know what the preferred term is, like breaking into computer systems. We sort of made that into a sport in school, to break into each other's home computers and stuff, and always following. I don't even remember what it was called anymore. We were always following these security mailing lists and looking for the latest 0 days. And I remember always browsing Packet Storm, looking for exploits. And I mean, we were script kiddies basically, right? But with aspirations to understand the exploits that we were using. But we were just kids, and we were having fun, and I was really into that for a while. But then I sort of went back into the programming area because that's what I thought was more fun. Anyways, so I was very happy that those guys exposed me to Linux and networking and stuff, and I got a lot of exposure to other programming languages like Bash and Perl and PHP. So when I dropped out of school there, I was able to get a job doing web development based on the skills that I had accumulated just from screwing around in school, basically. I got a job doing web development at a little place, and I worked there for a couple of months, up to the point where it turned out that they couldn't pay me anymore because their customers were not paying. And we made a deal with the company that I would be paid in computer parts, or something like that. It was all very sketchy. So after they paid me out in parts, then I just left because I didn't want to. I I didn't have any other income, so I couldn't pay rent with computer parts. So I didn't want to, sell them for money. But I was able to move to a different job at this point, where I could do C++, and it was because I had also picked up some more C++ and a lot of Linux skills and stuff in this time at school and in that time doing web development. I just kept learning all the time, and then trying to force myself to try new things and learn new things. And with that, I was able to get a job at a company where we were building these logistics machines for textiles and for laundry systems and stuff. And the signature product was this sort of an ATM for clothes that companies would buy, like a hospital or a car factory or someplace like that. And then all the employees would store their clothes in this ATM, and they would swipe their card in the morning and get a uniform for the day. And then they would return it at the end of the day, and all the clothes had RFID tags in them, so we would know, how often people would change clothes and stuff, and that was very valuable information for the companies because they needed that for health and sanitation code compliance or whatever. So I was doing that for 5 years, but then eventually it got to a point where it just felt like I just felt alone at this company because most of the other engineers left, and then we got some new people in, but it didn't feel like the old family or whatever anymore. And then I kept accumulating responsibilities, but they never really paid me anymore despite adding responsibilities to my job, and I got really frustrated with that. And actually, I remember talking with the CEO of that company not long before I left, and I was saying that it's not really cool that that the IT guy left, and I took on the IT guy's responsibilities in addition to my own job, and I'm doing what was previously 2 jobs, and I'm doing that for the same pay, and that's not really cool. And I remember the CEO told me that you have to understand, Andreas, that at your age, you're not going to be making any more money than this. I can't pay you more than this. You're too young. And I was really upset by that. I thought that was such bullshit. But then I did what I see now was totally the right thing, which was to just leave and go elsewhere. And what I did was I just applied for a job at Nokia, because I was a huge fan of Qt and I was a huge fan of KDE. I'd been using KDE and contributing to KDE for a while at that point in my spare time, and I even went to the annual KDE conference. I think it was in 2006 in Ireland, and it was a good time. And I really, really enjoyed working on KDE. So I thought, like, well, what would be my dream job? I guess the most fun programming I've ever done was working on KDE and using Qt. And in my mind, like, you couldn't really go work at KDE because it was like an open source project, but you could go and work at Commute, which was part of Nokia at that point. So that's where I applied for a job, and I remember I had no idea if they would take me seriously, because I was very unsure, not having any education and whatever. I thought that, oh, we'll see what happens. But I still applied, and I got a phone screen interview with this guy named Thierry, who called me. I remember I was sitting in a parking lot somewhere, and I was super nervous. But it went all right, and he asked me all these questions about C++, minutia, and like little trivia, and I knew all of them, and I felt like, okay, I know this stuff. This is pretty easy, and it went well. And so they wanted me to come up to do an on-site interview, and that worked out pretty well as well. And then I got a job there, and I hadn't really planned for any of this, so it was kind of a shock to my life at the time. But I knew that I just had to go, because it was like this sort of follow your heart thing. So I just went, and I left a mess behind, and it was very not cool to just do that, but I did. And yeah, it is what it is. I ended up really enjoying that job. They put me, because I had a lot of experience working on KHTML, or not like super much, but some experience, then they ended up assigning me to the Qt WebKit team, and they just sat me down next to this guy named Ben and told me, like, all right, so here's WebKit, go and make some fixes for it. Here's the bug list, and I did, and it was fun. It's great. It was really enjoyable working there, and it was amazing being surrounded by all these people who were super skilled at C++ and super knowledgeable about it, and also super interested in it, and like just really passionate. It was amazing, and I learned so much in such a short time there. Good times. But then yeah, it was like a really good time for the first year and a half or so. But then we got to a point where there was this big thing that happened, that Microsoft and Nokia, I mean, like, if you were involved at Nokia at the time, then you know this story by heart, but like there was this burning platform memo thing that came out after we took on a new CEO, a former Microsoft exec, and he came in as sort of what's now obviously a Trojan horse, and what was then obviously a Trojan horse. So this ex-Microsoft guy came in and just started like fucking up the company basically, and ruining all of our Linuxy good times, and it just killed everyone's spirit, and killed mine too. And like, I remember when they announced that we were going to switch over to focusing on Windows oriented development and targeting Windows Phone or whatever, then on that same day, like, so many people announced, I mean, to each other, or told each other that, like, yeah, you're leaving, I'm leaving too, like, definitely. So I left, or I told everyone I was going to leave, and I knew I was going to leave, but then I didn't really know where to go. But thankfully, someone at Apple reached out to me and asked if I wanted to interview with them. And I thought that sounded great. So I did that. And if I recall correctly, I had the first phone interview while I was riding a bus somewhere. And I was kind of surprised that the interview was completely non-technical. It was like just trying to get to know me. I thought that was very curious, but I liked it. And eventually they were interested in meeting me in person, so they flew me over there from Norway. I was living in Norway at the time, by the way, working at Nokia. So they flew me over to the US, and I met with the team. I thought the interview went really well. Like, I met with 6 different pairs of people through the whole day, and I thought it went well. There were some things that I couldn't quite work out, but I was able to make a backup solution for everything. Like, oh, I see what you want me to do here, like what kind of data structure you want me to use for this, but I'm not confident with that one, so let me build you something with associative arrays instead, and we'll like solve it badly, because it's always better to solve something badly in an interview than not solve it at all. Like, show the interviewer that you can build something ugly that works, because that's a super valuable skill. And anyways, I thought it all worked out, and but then I went back to Norway, and I heard back from them that they were unable to give me an offer, and they were very cryptic about it, and they just told me that they couldn't give me an offer, and I thought that meant that they didn't want to hire me because they didn't like me. So I was like, all right, well, I guess that's that. But then, I don't know, it was like a week later or something, I get a call from a different manager at Apple, and he says that he wants to meet me in person for a different team. And I had to come over again. And I remember, like, they didn't really explain to me what was going on, so I remember being kind of frustrated by this at the time. And even writing back to this guy, like, I mean, yeah, I guess I can come over, but like, what do you think is the point? Like, the other team didn't like me. Like, why would you like me? I wrote him something like that, and he never responded. He just sent me a plane ticket. So I don't know what that was about, or how that went over. Maybe he didn't even see the email. But anyways, so I went over again, and I met with this other team, and I thought, like, yeah, this is going well too. Like, I'm answering all the questions, solving all the problems, but that's what I thought last time, like, that it was going okay. So, again, I go home, and, but then I learned later that same day that, yeah, we definitely want to hire you. And so they explained to me that the first team wanted to hire me as well, but because they were specifically an iOS team, the first team was not able to give me an offer because they required everyone working on iOS had to be on site. And because I didn't have a visa, and I couldn't get a visa because I didn't have any, I didn't have a university degree, then I was not able to qualify for an H-1B visa. So that team was not able to give me an offer because of that. But they didn't explain that. So anyways, it was like, it was good to finally learn what that was about. So yeah, so of course I accepted this offer, and I think this was like in May or something of 2011. So I accepted the offer, and I mean, informally, and then I told my manager at Nokia that, like, okay, so I should tell you that I got an offer from Apple, and I've accepted it informally. So just so you know, like, I just want to give you a heads up that it's going to come in formally soon, and I'm gonna accept that too. So I just wanted to let you know. Like, I wanted to be upfront about it. I don't know. It just seemed like the polite thing to do to me. But then those nice, lovely people in the Apple legal department took, I think, another 4 or 5 months to actually send me the formal offer. And I don't know what the hell they were doing at that time, but let me tell you, I felt kind of awkward about having told my manager that I got an informal offer and I was going to accept the formal one. Because if I had just kept quiet about it, it would not have been nearly as awkward as it became. And I really liked my manager at the time. She was a good friend of mine, and I felt like such a jackass. Like I really let her down with this bullshit. Anyways, so lesson learned. I guess. Anyways, then I got the job at Apple, and they wanted me to do even more WebKit stuff, which was awesome. Because at Qt, I was doing 98% WebKit, but then like the occasional Qt bug. But then at Apple, it was like, just do WebKit and do Safari as well. I mean, actually, now that I think about it, I think my original job at Apple was supposed to be as a Safari UI engineer, but I think I never did a single Safari UI code change ever. And I have, by the way, I've just totally like driven myself lost here because I was just talking and not paying attention to where I was going. So I drove past my work and drove somewhere else. So I was supposed to be a Safari UI engineer, but I just never did any UI work. I just got the job and I started working on WebKit right away. And then the idea was that it was supposed to take a year if I worked for the company for a year remotely, then I would qualify for an L1 visa, which is like an international transfer visa. So they just set me up in Ireland and said like, all right, just spend a year doing remote work and then we can bring you over here. So that's what I did, more or less. I didn't spend that much time in Ireland though. Like I was kind of traveling all over the place at the time, just trying to make it work on the road. I remember feeling very guilty and sneaky about it at the time because I didn't tell anyone that I was out traveling. I mean, officially. So I just traveled around anyway and hoped that it would just work out. And I guess it kind of did. Because like, who cares where a remote worker is if he's producing work? I was just looking for my office parking lot. That looks familiar. And so yeah, I got the job at Apple. And then I spent the first year, or like more than a year actually, because then it took a while again for the legal people to make a visa, or to acquire a visa, whatever you call it. And then I spent after I got the visa, then I moved over to the US and I spent about 2 years there. And then I wanted to move back to Europe because I really didn't like being in the US. It was just not a good environment, I felt. I didn't feel at home there, and I didn't feel safe there. So eventually I kept asking my boss, like, can I go back to Europe now? Can I go back to Europe, Sweden, whatever, please? And he kept saying like, yeah, sure, maybe. Like, have you thought about a green card? Just apply for a green card, Andreas. Don't you want to get a green card? So we were sort of like, I was going, Sweden, and he was going green card. And eventually, I guess I ended up in a situation where I was forced to press the issue, um, for outside reasons, and I basically had to. I was forced to say like, dude, I gotta go, um, for family reasons, and like if you want to keep me on, I'll happily work remotely. But if you can't keep me on, I understand. But he wanted to keep me on, so and he understood that I had to go. Um, so he set me up with a new employment contract at Apple Sweden, where I could work remotely. So I went to Sweden and worked remotely for Apple, and kept doing that for a couple of years, and that was all right. Um, I think I flew out to Apple on average, maybe every 10 weeks or something like that. It was supposed to be every 8 weeks, but in practice, it was more like every 10 or 11 weeks. And it was all right. I was definitely more productive when I was on site, but I was also not doing anything other than working when I was on site. So maybe that was not great. Anyways, I guess this this has become more about like how what was my career rather than like how did I get to where I am with programming. But of course, like this whole time I was working on, I was writing C++ every day and working on WebKit every day, and I always try to stay really productive and make many patches and review other people's patches and help out with things that I didn't understand so well and try to get to know them and learn them and stuff. And I really wanted to be I wanted to be a productive contributor, or like very prolific, I guess, because I had this inferiority complex about my lack of education, my lack of experience to compensate for the education or whatever. Like I just felt like I mentioned in another video, I felt like a little brother to everyone. So I had this like little chip on my shoulder about that, I guess you could say, sort of. So I was always trying to prove myself, and I always try to put out as many patches as I could. And I remember like looking at patch counts and stuff, and trying to like have the most patches in the project for a while. Then I mean I let go of that idea eventually, but it was something that I cared about for a while. Just to have some kind of metric where I could show that like I'm good enough. Like look how much work I'm producing. That's weird. Anyways, but then after some time, after I moved to Sweden, I was working from Sweden, and I was not like exposed to this American California a Bay Area culture on a daily basis anymore. Then I just over time or gradually became so detached from Apple, and like then Apple started moving in this completely other direction than I was, and the company started becoming very political and taking all kinds of stances on issues, and I really didn't like that because I just wanted to work at a company. I didn't want to work at like an activist organization. I mean, I really think that politics should be kept out of the business. Like you can have personal politics and talk about politics if you want. I don't care about that. Like, I've done that myself, but like a company being political, I didn't like it. And it got to the point where like I felt really alienated from that whole thing, and I knew I had to quit. And it was really painful to quit because I super identified with that job. Like I was Andreas at Apple, I was awesomekling@apple.com, and I was proud of my email address. And I was like, it was like the first line of my biography anywhere. Is that I was an engineer at Apple, and suddenly I had to give that up, and it was really unpleasant. It was like shocking to do that, because it was like who I was, and I had to let it go because it didn't really represent who I was anymore. And um, after I managed to quit, then I got into this really confusing, depressive state for a long, long time, and I didn't have any responsibilities, so I just spent my time doing absolute nonsense. Um, for like over a year, like a year and a half or something, just like doing complete nonsense. Um, Feeling really sad and bad all the time, making everyone around me suffer from it. Um, until it was really until I asked for outside help with that problem, and I got help, and I started going to these regular meetings and stuff, and um, started working out how to live again. And I know maybe it sounds dumb, or like a strange problem to have, but for me it was like I died, and I had to find a new identity, and I looked in all the wrong places. Like I looked in all the wrong places. But yeah, so eventually I I came back to life, and I thought, I always wanted to write my own operating system. And what if I just start doing it? What if I stop imagining what it will be like and just start doing it? Then I'll actually know what it's like. And that's where I started with that. It started as a project to give myself something to do that would become the foundation of my identity after I had lost my old one. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but there's all kinds of details about this that are unpleasant. So I would rather talk about the high level version of it at this point. Um, I I just wanted a new life. I didn't want to be someone else. I wanted to have a new life where I was me, basically. Because I could remember a time before. I didn't really know when the time ended, but like there was a time when I was excited about programming. I was always happy to programming. I was always making these little things, and at some point during my career, that disappeared. And I don't know when. I'm not sure. Maybe it was when I went to Apple, and I stopped working on random open source stuff, or um, maybe I got jaded at Nokia when we were doing this cool Linuxy stuff, and they just decided that we were going to use Windows instead. I don't know. And maybe it was just inside me. It doesn't really matter. What matters is I woke up and I realized I need a new life, man. So that's why I started doing an operating system to give myself a foundation to build a new identity on and a new life. And I have been doing it pretty hardcore ever since I started. And I think it really helped me get back into a good headspace, because I think, what was it, 6 months into it or something, I realized that, you know, maybe it's not the best thing to just sit at home and work on my operating system, just to try to drag myself out of depression. Um, because at that point, like I didn't have I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I hadn't been um, posting much about it online or anything, um, and I hadn't been. I didn't have any patches from anyone. I didn't have any. Um, there was no IRC channel. Nowadays, it's so different. Like it's like many people on IRC, and we talk in there every day, and or almost every day, and I have all these emails from people all the time, going back and forth and putting out the videos. It's like a whole, it has like a life of its own now, and it's, I guess it's my life actually, and it's really nice. Um, this new identity is one that I can totally get behind, because I would much rather be this guy than the guy who gave up his identity to be like a part of a company. But anyway, 6 months into that, sitting by myself, just churning out an operating system, I realized, hey, I should probably go and get a job so that I can participate with other people and do things together. And I'm happy that I did that, because now I have a job where I can go and hang out with people, and we can do programming, and it's fun, and I get to do all these little projects. And I made sure when they gave me the offer for the job, I made sure that that they let me work on open source, and they don't try to like claim ownership of anything that I build and stuff like that. Like all the adult things that you should be making sure about your job when you sign up for a new job. But I don't put my identity in this new job, and that allows me to live as myself instead. And for the first time in my life, I feel that I'm not my job anymore. Um, I'm a separate person who does his own things, and it's really fantastic. Because if I had started identifying with this job, I would have stopped working on Serenity a week into it, and it's not like that, which is really good. And I really like this job. It's super super fun to work with embedded stuff again, which I haven't touched for like 10 years, I feel like, unless you count iOS, which maybe some people would. But it's not my identity, and that's a good thing. Yeah, so I guess that's sort of how I got to where I am. I'm not sure if that answers the question how I got to where I am with programming, but it's how I got to here, where I'm sitting right now, about to go into my office. So if you made it this far, then I certainly thank you for watching and for hanging out with me on the commute and in the parking lot here after the commute. Yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.